You are looking at a plant capable of fueling every engine you own. Diesel pickup truck, gasoline car, generator, tractor, lawnmower, all of them. And a farmer in the American Midwest is growing this plant right now, completely legally, on the very same land his grandfather farmed. After the last video, many of you asked me the same question. What about my gasoline engine? I heard every comment, and the answer changed everything I thought I knew about fuel. Because this plant doesn't produce just one fuel. It produces two. One for diesel engines, another for gasoline engines. No vehicle modifications, no special parts, no mechanic shop visits. And in 2010, an American university proved this with a single number that the oil industry wished you'd never see. 97%. Once you understand what that number means, you'll understand exactly why this plant was banned in 1937. But first, I need to tell you about a 1937 document that erased this plant from American life for 80 years. About 4 men whose names you already know, and about 2,000 fuel pumps that vanished from the Midwest the very year the law was signed. Stick with me to the end. Even if you live in a city house, even if you've never planted a seed in your life, even if you rent the land where you live, because what this farmer showed me works even on a quarter-acre plot with just a shed and a pickup truck. The first time I drove to his property, I almost missed the sign at the entrance. An old family name, hand-painted and faded by time. His name was Daniel, a third-generation farmer with calloused hands, a man of few words during the first 10 minutes of our conversation. He took me to the back of the barn, grabbed a plastic jug from a shelf, and poured a liquid that looked like cooking oil into a diesel tractor. The engine started on the first try. No sputtering, no black smoke, no hesitation. I stood there for 15 minutes waiting for the engine to fail. It never did. When I asked where he bought that fuel, he looked at me as if I'd asked the most obvious question in the world. He pointed to the field behind the barn. "I grow it," he said. That was the moment everything changed for me. The plant is hemp. Industrial hemp. Cannabis sativa. And I need to be clear about one thing right now. Because the confusion between hemp and marijuana isn't an accident. It was manufactured on purpose. Industrial hemp has less than 0.3% THC, the psychoactive compound. You could smoke a whole bale of this plant and feel nothing but a scratchy throat. In 2018, a federal law legalized the growing, processing, transporting, and selling of industrial hemp in the United States. Today, it's just as legal as corn, soybeans, or wheat. But for the 80 years prior, this plant was treated as a narcotic. And the reason had nothing to do with anyone getting high. It had everything to do with fuel and money. And a handful of men who had more of both than anyone else in the country. Before we get to that, let me show you what this plant actually does. Because once you see that, the rest of the story is going to make you angry. Hemp seeds contain between 30% and 35% oil. This oil is extracted via cold pressing, the same technique used for olive oil. This oil turns into biodiesel through a process called transesterification. You mix the oil with methanol and a bit of caustic soda, which acts as a catalyst. The mixture reacts and separates into two layers, biodiesel on top, glycerin on the bottom, which can be turned into soap. You wash the biodiesel, let it dry, and it's ready for any diesel engine ever built. Not a modified engine, any diesel engine. Because the diesel engine was never designed to run on petroleum. Rudolf Diesel built his engine in Germany in the 1890s and called it an oil engine. In 1900, he showcased it at the Paris World Fair, running on peanut oil. The engine ran so smoothly that hardly anyone realized the fuel wasn't petroleum-based. Diesel dreamed of a world where any farmer could grow their own fuel on their own land. He never saw that dream come true. In September 1913, he boarded a ship bound for England to negotiate a deal for his engines with the British Royal Navy. He had dinner on board, retired to his cabin, and by the next morning, he had vanished. His bed was untouched. His watch and coat were folded neatly by the ship's railing. 10 days later, fishermen found a body in the North Sea, too decomposed to identify. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened. Here is the calculation, straight to the point. 1.5 hectares, roughly equivalent to an acre, of hemp produces about 320 kilograms of seeds. When pressed, this yields around 80 liters of oil, which converts to approximately 75 liters of biodiesel. Well, that's enough to keep a generator running for weeks, or a tractor operating throughout the entire planting season. That same hectare produces over 2 tons of stalks. When fermented and distilled, these stalks become ethanol, the fuel used in gasoline engines. In other words, a single harvest from a single plot of land can fuel both types of engines you might have in your garage. Farmers' cooperatives in Austria have been doing this for years with canola and sunflowers, pressing their own biodiesel for their trucks and tractors without needing permission from any oil company. There is nothing stopping an American farmer from doing exactly the same thing with hemp. Nothing, that is, except for 80 years of deliberately imposed silence regarding what this plant is capable of doing. And this brings me to the part I promised at the beginning. In February 1938, 5 months after a federal law had effectively killed the hemp industry in the United States, a famous American mechanics magazine published a cover story hailing hemp as the new billion-dollar crop. The article described a new machine capable of processing the fiber on an industrial scale and predicted the creation of thousands of jobs and an entirely new agricultural economy. The editors didn't even realize the law had already been signed. The future was being announced at its own funeral, and no one in the room noticed. Behind that law lay powerful interest from the chemical and oil sectors of the era, men who saw industrial hemp as a direct threat to their own businesses in paper, synthetic fibers, and fossil fuels. Accounts from the time even gave rise to the legend that Henry Ford built a car with hemp fiber panels and tested fuel derived from the plant, a story that still divides historians today, but one that illustrates the immense interest this crop generated before it was banned. The practical result was this. For 80 years, a fuel alternative that could be grown on any farm simply fell off the radar until the 2018 law unlocked everything again, and hardly anyone noticed. Daniel didn't read any magazine articles. He didn't need anyone's permission to understand a plant his family had been growing for generations. He simply held on to that knowledge, the way farmers hold on to everything, through hands-on practice, passed down from father to son, never written up in a study, never published anywhere. You weren't supposed to know any of this. You weren't supposed to know about the 97%. You weren't supposed to know about the 2,000 gas stations that shut down. You weren't supposed to know about the magazine that arrived after the funeral. You were supposed to keep going to the gas station, watching prices rise every winter, without ever asking who decided it had to be that way. Daniel didn't ask that question yesterday. His family has been asking it for generations, and they answered it with a seed. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge is sometimes sidelined to protect someone's profits, you already know what to do next. I want to hear from you. If you could plant a hectare of hemp this season, what would you fuel up first? The pickup truck? The tractor? The generator? Leave a comment. I read them all, and your answer determines the next video. And subscribe, not for my sake, but for what's coming next. Because in the next video, I'm going to show you what's done with the part of this plant that never gets burned. And the industry it threatens is even bigger than the oil industry.